People who have been through it describe a moment, sometimes days before, sometimes weeks, when their cat changed. Not dramatically, not in a way that would register as significant if you didn't already know what was coming. A quieting, a settling. The cat who had always kept a certain distance began staying closer. The cat who slept in other rooms started appearing on the bed, arriving in the night without announcement and remaining there until morning. The cat who was normally active became still, not the stillness of illness, but a different quality of stillness, as if something in them had shifted from motion to presence. Some people describe their cat changing before they themselves understood what was happening. Before the diagnosis was confirmed, before the decline became undeniable, before anyone in the house had said the words out loud, the cat had already arrived differently, already begun the particular attending that, in retrospect, marked the beginning of what would become a vigil. This is what this video is about, not the loss itself, but what cats do in the time before it, and what that behaviour tells us about what they understand, and what the relationship between you has always held. What cats do at the end of a life, and in the time approaching it, follows a recognisable pattern that appears across different breeds, different households, different circumstances. The specifics vary, the pattern doesn't. And once you understand what underlies it, the behaviour stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like what it is. The expression of a bond that understood something before the rest of the house did. The scientific foundation begins with what cats can detect. A body in decline produces measurable changes in scent, in chemistry, in the invisible signals that a living organism broadcasts when its systems are under significant strain. Cortisol rises, metabolic byproducts change, the breath changes, the skin changes. These are not subtle shifts by the standard of feline olfaction, which is estimated to be between 14 and 40 times more sensitive than a human's. What registers as nothing to the people in the room is, to a cat with their nose, and their accumulated model of this particular person's baseline, a significant departure from normal. Cats also read posture, breath rhythm, movement patterns, and micro-expressions with a precision built from years of close observation. They have a detailed model of the person they are bonded to, how that person normally moves, breathes, holds their body, occupies a room. When the model and the reality begin to diverge significantly, the cat registers the divergence. They don't have a word for what they're detecting, but they respond to it. The response takes several forms, and nearly all of them are variations on the same underlying impulse: to be close, to stay, to not leave. Increased proximity is the most commonly reported behaviour. Cats who are independent, who slept elsewhere, who kept their own schedule, who came and went on their own terms, begin staying. They position themselves near the person who is declining. They follow them from room to room. They sleep on or beside them in ways that are quantitatively different from their previous patterns. People who have cared for dying family members often describe the cat appearing in the sick room and remaining there for hours, for days, in a sustained presence that has a different quality from ordinary resting. Not restless, not demanding, simply there, in the specific way that seems to be about something. Your cat is reading you constantly. Your scent, your posture, your cortisol levels, the micro-expressions your face makes when you think no one is watching. They build a detailed model of everyone they live with, and most owners never realise how complete that model is. I put together a guide covering exactly that layer. The signals cats send and the signals they read from you that most people never learn to recognise. It's called What Your Cat is Hiding, and the link is in the description. If you've ever felt like your cat understands you on a level you can't fully explain, that guide is going to show you why that feeling is more accurate than you think. There is a second dimension to this that people find harder to talk about, and it is the one that tends to stay with them longest. Cats change not just toward the person who is dying, but in the household more broadly. Their behaviour with other family members shifts. They become more attentive to whoever is most affected, by the approaching loss, positioning themselves near people who are grieving before the grief has fully arrived, responding to the elevated stress and altered emotional state of a household that is living in anticipation of loss. They read the room. They read all of it simultaneously, and they respond to the aggregate of what they find. What this means is that the cat who shows up in the final weeks is not responding to a single signal. They are responding to a system of signals: the declining person, the affected family members, the changed atmosphere of the house, the altered routines and sounds and smells that a household approaching loss produces. They have assembled all of this into a picture, and the picture is telling them something, and their response to it is presence. There are documented accounts from hospice workers, from palliative care nurses, from people who have spent time in settings where death is a regular presence, of cats behaving in ways that suggested awareness of what was coming before it arrived. Oscar, a cat who lived in a dementia care facility in Rhode Island, became known for his practice of settling beside patients in the hours before their deaths, a pattern so consistent that staff began notifying families when Oscar appeared beside a resident. He was not always present in the ward. He was not indiscriminate. He arrived specifically in the final hours of patients he had not previously paid particular attention to, and he stayed until they were gone. Oscar is the documented case, but the pattern he represents is not rare. People who have been present at deaths, at home in care settings, in the long final stretch of a loved one's life, describe their cats doing versions of the same thing, not dramatic, not theatrical, arriving and staying. The vigil kept in the language available to them. What does a cat understand about death? This is the question people inevitably arrive at, and it is probably the wrong question. What they understand is not death as a concept, not in any way that maps onto human understanding of mortality, loss, finality. What they understand is change, significant, irreversible change in the physical and chemical reality of someone they have been closely monitoring. They understand that the model they have built is not matching reality in a way that is getting worse rather than better. They understand, perhaps, that this is a different kind of not matching than the temporary kind. Illness that resolves, absence that ends, disruption that settles. Whether that understanding constitutes something we would recognize as knowing what's coming, that is genuinely uncertain. But the behavior is not uncertain. The behavior is clear and consistent and documented. And the behavior is stay, be close, do not leave. The people who carry these memories most vividly are not the ones who watch their cat perform some remarkable act. They are the ones who remember the ordinary, sustained presence. The cat who was there every morning in the last weeks. The cat who slept on the pillow beside the person who was dying night after night, until the night they didn't need to anymore. The cat who sat beside the person in the chair by the window during the long afternoons of decline, not asking for anything, not going anywhere, just present in the full and deliberate meaning of that word. This is what cats do when they know it's the end. They stay. In a species not known for its willingness to subordinate its own schedule and preferences to the needs of another, the sustained voluntary presence of a cat during the final passage of someone they are bonded to is not a small thing. It is, in the language available to them, everything they have to give. The bond that produces this behaviour was built over years of ordinary life, of watching and being watched, of proximity and familiarity, of the thousands of small moments that constitute a relationship between a person and an animal who chose to be near each other. The vigil at the end is not separate from that relationship. It is the relationship, in its fullest expression, at the moment when expression matters most. If you have been through this, if you watched your cat change in the weeks before a loss, or if your cat kept vigil beside someone you loved, tell me about it in the comments. What did they do? What do you still think about when you think about that time? I want to hear the specific moments, because I think what you describe says something about the depth of these bonds that we don't say enough, and that deserves to be said out loud. There's something that emerges in almost every account of this, a detail so consistent across different people and different circumstances that it stops feeling like coincidence. The cat doesn't leave. Not when the room gets harder to be in. Not when the other people come and go, cycling through the presence and the leaving that humans do in difficult times. Not when the atmosphere of the room becomes the kind that most living creatures move away from instinctively. The cat stays. In a species whose fundamental survival strategy was built on the ability to assess a situation and remove itself when the situation became threatening or uncomfortable, the choice to remain, through hours, through days, through what is happening in that room, is not nothing. It is, in fact, extraordinary. People who have sat with someone dying describe the cat as a specific kind of anchor, not demanding anything, not needing to be attended to, just present in the corner of vision, on the edge of the bed, somewhere in the room, persisting in the vigil with a steadiness that the humans in the room sometimes struggle to match. There is something stabilizing about a creature who is simply there without complication, without the weight of anticipatory grief or the management of their own emotion, attending in the clean and uncomplicated way that animals attend. The cat is not afraid of what is happening, or if they register something that functions like fear, it does not override the presence. The bond is stronger than whatever instinct might pull them away. This, too, is information about what the relationship held. Some cats become more vocal in these final periods, a low persistent sound, not distress exactly, but something. Some cats groom the person they are beside, a behaviour that, in the cat's social language, means something about care and belonging. Some cats press themselves against the body with a firmness that seems deliberate, as if weight itself were something to offer. All of these are variations of the same thing, a creature using the full vocabulary available to them to say something that the vocabulary was not quite built to say. What they are saying is not complicated, even if we reach for complicated explanations. They are saying, I am here, I am not leaving. Whatever this is, I am in it with you. That is the vigil. That is what cats do when they know it's the end. And for the people who received it, who had a cat settle beside someone they were losing, or who felt a cat arrive and stay during their own worst hours, the memory of it tends to carry a particular weight that other memories don't. Not because it explained anything, or changed anything, or made what happened less difficult, but because in a moment when the ordinary world had narrowed to something almost unbearably small, there was a creature who chose to be in that smallness with them, who did not leave, who stayed until it was over, and sometimes after. That kind of presence, freely given, sustained through difficulty, specifically directed at the person who needed it, is rare in any language. The fact that it came without words from a creature who had no obligation and no social pressure and no reason except the bond itself is what makes it stay with people the way it does. It was love. It looked like staying, and staying was enough. If your cat has done this, if you watch them arrive and remain in the way this video describes, tell me about it in the comments. What do you remember most? I want to hear it. Because the accumulation of these specific moments from so many different people and so many different animals says something that I think we don't say enough. That these bonds are real and deep, and that what happens at the end of a life is sometimes the clearest evidence of what was present all along. One more thing that deserves to be said, because it comes up in these accounts, often enough that ignoring it would be dishonest after. People describe their cats changing after the death as well, not just during the approach to it, but in the hours and days following. Some cats search, as described in the previous video, investigating the places the person occupied. Some cats are quieter than usual. Some cats seek out the people who are most affected by the loss with an increased proximity that mirrors what they showed in the final weeks. as if the vigil does not end with the death, but continues into the grief that follows it. The cat who kept vigil beside a dying person and the cat who sits beside the surviving family member in the weeks after are doing the same thing, reading what is happening, responding with presence, staying, the bond extended through the end of one life and into the grief of the ones that continue. That's what these animals are capable of, not because they were trained to be, not because they were rewarded for it, not because anything asked it of them, because the relationship was real enough that when it mattered most they were there. That is the whole thing. That is what cats do when they know it's the end.